Once again, Shana Tova, everyone. In an attempt to limit the time of our Yom Kippur service, I am pre-recording my message with the hope that at some point you are listening to it. Milwaukee, April 2020. 170 residents protesting the governor's safer at home legislation rallied without masks or social distancing to defy both government regulations and logic born of wisdom. One woman proudly held a sign, "I want a haircut." Fast forward to June. New York. In a bagel shop, an unmasked woman responded to a complaint against her by coughing into the face of the accused customer. Serendipitously, the episode was recorded and posted on Facebook for everyone to witness. Our severe and unforeseen global health threat has compelled us to prioritize communal safety. The new normal has temporarily vitiated some of our freedoms of choice, no matter how offensive we believe denying our right to a haircut. COVID-19 scripts a new narrative, one which destroys any illusions of invincibility or entitlement. The new narrative leaves no one unscathed. Mighty professional sports organizations are playing in empty arenas. Summer camps were bereft of campers. Schools and universities have agonized over how to safely educate our young. Whatever our age or status in life, the pandemic has humbled all of us. Cynthia Ocelli wrote a blog, "The Truth About Entitlement. Life doesn't owe you anything." Life doesn't owe you anything. It doesn't owe you perfect or even good parents. Life doesn't owe you health, happiness, abundance, success, comfort, or immunity from pain and problems. It doesn't owe you a job, a house, a bed, or a single meal. No one owes you kindness, love, recognition, empathy, apologies, or understanding. You aren't entitled to a single thing. Your family owes you nothing. Your government owes you nothing. No one owes you anything at all. I accept the premise of Ocelli's sobering statement, but not entirely her contents. We are not owed a perfect life, an unblemished family, a thriving business, or material affluence. We are not owed life without impediments. Yet I do believe we are owed an opportunity to succeed in all of the above. Following our recent tropical storm, many of us not only lost power, but entire food supplies, and even experienced destruction of our homes. In Nassau County, our executive, supported by several state and local officials, believed the power company owed each household monetary compensation for the spoilage. Throughout the pandemic, our New York governor has believed that we are owed protection in terms of health and safety, and he has imposed restrictions and regulations to that end. Following countless new illustrations of racial brutality, people of all colors and creeds have vocalized our disgust with the inequalities still plaguing society, believing justifiably that our government owes us nothing less than an end to discriminatory practices and opportunities. In other words, we are owed an opportunity to enjoy quality of life. I believe those rights extend to viable health care, and elimination of poverty. Throughout Yom Kippur, we repeat the confessional Ashamnu, a prayer expressing the idea of collectivity. The prayer is written in the plural. Ashamnu implies that there is something consequential owed to each of us, the reassurance that the person next door, or even on the other coast, is watching our back. Over the summer, I read Larry Tye's new book on Senator Joseph McCarthy. McCarthy's fanaticism and demagoguery brought ruin and obstruction and destruction to innocent people whose only crime was exercising cherished democratic freedoms secured by our Constitution. McCarthy exploited national fears to accomplish little more than to violate cherished rights Americans were owed. There are several reasons why I believe the first person plural dominates the Yom Kippur ritual. One reason is to help acknowledge with great comfort how we all stand together spiritually before God. A second reason is to highlight the kind of value-based life we owe one another, the value-based life that McCarthy just simply ignored, the value-based life that we owe one another and are owed by each other. Ward Farnsworth wrote a book about the movement known as Stoicism. The Stoics broke life down into those virtues most fundamental for living a quality life. Stoicism, he wrote, also offers a strong affirmative vision of what life is for, the pursuit of virtue. Living virtuously means living by reason, and the Stoics regard reason as calling for honesty, kindness, humility, and devotion to the greater good. It also calls for involvement in public affairs, that is, in the work of helping others in whatever ways are possible. I believe his words should resonate with us. We owe one another those virtuous qualities which fulfill the fundamental vision for a better world, and therefore each of us has a right to be owed such commitment from the greater community without exception. We are owed these statements that are listed in the Ashamnu to recognize that we have an obligation to watch each other's back. Consequently, when we refuse to wear a mask, or when we defy the demands of social distancing, when we cavalierly ignore the space and privacy of our neighbor, we are not exercising libertarian privilege, but are merely displaying contempt for the world in which we live and the people within. It is ironic how the forsaken and exiled concept of community, once so essential to Jewish experience, and the community notion which is reflected in the plural Ashamnu prayer, this notion of community, once so essential to Jewish experience, has resurfaced during COVID-19, even if against our will. As our generation zealously clings to the religion of individuality, loyalty to community has almost become counterintuitive. One of the more positive byproducts of the pandemic is the realization that community matters, both to our individual and to our national consciousness. Community during these difficult months has resurfaced. It has resurfaced in the way we are strengthening contacts with family and friends, often cast aside, albeit unintentionally, due to the rigors of work and our social lives. The almost obnoxious mantra, and this our children and grandchildren can appreciate, the mantra, "Why don't you call your grandparents?" has become less of a plea and more of a given. Community has resurfaced in the way we pay homage to public employees and professionals, often taken for granted. The dedicated hospital social workers and nursing staffs daily risking their health, the sanitation crews and postal letter carriers and cemetery laborers fulfilling their responsibilities without interruption, the public school teachers and college professors laboring to educate our children under adverse conditions for which they are not trained. Community has resurfaced in the way we are expressing appreciation for all of these remarkable and courageous people. Community has resurfaced as the exclusive alternative to failure. Non-compliant restaurants and bars attempting to circumvent the rules have been cited and even temporarily shut down. Athletes ignoring team and league restrictions have borne the consequences of forced quarantine. Their cavalier behavior extended to their teams being shut down, and a supportive public denied some coveted entertainment during a time of seclusion. Even state-authorized return of children to public schools has led to a spike in the virus and reverting in some states to an online education exclusively. Each one of these illustrations calls attention to the centrality of community and what the community is owed by each of its constituents. In Alan Marinis's book, Everyday Holiness, he describes the Jewish ethical trait of responsibility. He writes, "We human beings prefer to put on blinders and adopt all sorts of rationalizations that permit us to avoid shouldering responsibility and even to do all sorts of harm. When confronted with the damage we have caused, we are prone to take refuge in denial. But when we elevate the responsibility for the details into personal spiritual practice, we deny ourselves all opportunity for blindness and rationalization, and thus do ourselves an enormous spiritual favor." What Marinis suggests is that shouldering responsibility without excuses for actions associated with the community, that is what we owe one another, and that is what we are owed by each other. We are owed each other's sense of dignity and honor. We are owed respect and concern, both by those who know us well and by those whom we only share the nation in which we live. We are owed the responsibility of our neighbor to behave without denying or abusing our right to health and safety. We are owed a pledge without denials, without rationalization, that no one will be so immersed in self-indulgent and self-serving behavior which places us and our community at peril, physically, economically, emotionally. So, my friends, Yom Kippur reminds us that the symbolic book of life is a book we write collaboratively. It is a book we write collectively. The plural in Ashamnu reminds us that we are in this together. We are not just a bunch of individuals. We are, in every sense, a community. When one of us develops a spiritual or ethical writer's block when writing our book of life, the writing ceases until together, we figure out what to write next. Such is the extent to which everyone in our society owes and is owed by both the person next door and the landsman thousands of miles away. As long as the pandemic lingers, and hopefully far beyond, when our lives resume some state of normalcy, we not only owe each other our very best, but we are entitled to demand such decency in return. And what we owe and what we are owed are expressions of the loftiest values our society has to offer. Shana Tova, a year of joy, of peace, and accomplishment for all of us.